Let's
Real.
go.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Welcome in.
Thank you.
Good to be in the house.
It is good to be in the
to
house.
have you guys.
The house.
Yeah.
It
So-
just got real.
It just got real. You can feel it. You can feel
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we want to thank you guys for coming. because
Absolutely.
This is
Good to be here.
This is a moment that we've been really talking about for a while, and it's a moment where I guess the thing is, like when you go to show and tell when you were a kid, and you were to get in front of the class.
Yeah.
And you're so excited to share something. That's how I feel right now.
Hopefully we won't
That takes me
disappoint.
back a few years. Yeah, right. Show and tell.
So, welcome, gentlemen. Again, George Morris, Mr. John Ciet. You guys are Century 21 Everest owners and also the Everest sales system. So, before we get into that, we have a lot of questions, but it's going to be a conversation. This is a conversation.
That's great.
And
Let's do it.
We are just open.
It's not an interrogation.
No, it's not an interrogation.
Okay, just checking.
We just, I'm going to kick back here. I'm going to get to the side. We're just going to have a nice conversation. And I know we have a lot. Lewis had a really good one, and I figured that would be the moment just to hit him. Just go. Let's
Man, do it just like that.
You're gonna nail me.
It's like, I feel like I'm in the Wild West here. He's going to pull out that big gun.
Everybody, no, just kidding. So we were having a conversation yesterday. One of the things that I found interesting is just kind of as I was doing my own due diligence, I believe you gentlemen started Everest kind of during the financial crisis, right?
Correct.
It wasn't kind of. It was in the middle of it.
In the middle of the financial
like the real
crisis.
deal, yeah.
May 27th, 2009.
Oh, wow, even the
So
dates.
here's the interesting thing. Two gentlemen who are very successful in their own rights when it comes to real estate. Our question is, like, what propelled you to make that decision? Like, what was going on in the minds of George Morris and John Ciet to start off Everest during that time?
Well, he's probably the best one to start the conversation. We
Yeah,
both
in fact,
contribute, but
well, and you've got the answer when I came up with the question. I think with the answer what happened was there was a particular agent, and I had a lot of people don't know this. I had owned a real estate company before, and I sold it. And I sold my interest, and within like 18 months, I watched the entire organization completely destroy itself and cripple to the ground. And one of the things that I noted in that was that the one thing that makes all the difference in the world is leadership. And so I started watching, these truly like just beloved friends of mine that I watched just completely crumble economically and had like no environment in which to try to shape their life in. And I remember sitting at my desk or somewhere, I can't remember where I was, I may have been in a conference room now I think about it, and I remember sitting there and I had one of these dear friends come to me and sat down. He goes, "Let me tell you a story." And the story was a story of him going into an apartment or into a condo, getting in there, going to go take a listing, goes in to take the listing, actually gets the listing, and then this is where he breaks down into tears. He came back out and his car had been repossessed, not because he was illegally parked, but because he didn't have enough money to pay for the car. Wow. And still to this day, it gives me chills, and it made me realize that there needs to be a place where people can turn to in their greatest need and their greatest challenge. And jokingly, and I'm not making light of it in any way, sometimes people will say, "Gosh, I don't really go to church, but if I was to go to church, it might be Everest." And I joke about it, and I joke about it, Armani, but it's not because it's a religious revival, but it's because there's so much work that is done on the inside of our lives to help us, easily, shape the economic sizes of our lives, and it's been cool. So and I'll turn this to John, but I remember so clearly that I really believe this, that Everest wasn't necessarily created initially out of, oh my gosh, let's go conquer the world. It was more created out of what I would consider desperation. Oh. And it was created out of the fact that there was such a deep need for people to have hope, to people to have like it's going to be okay, like you can make it, homes will still sell, things may still move along, and that's not too far off from what many of us may feel in today's marketplace and economy and all from the political side of it, the civil unrest, the COVID side of it. I mean, it's there's a lot of similarities as to what that feels like, and I've felt those very same things. So that's when I'll turn to him. But I asked this question after that experience. I said, hey, what do you think about building a real estate company? And you can take it on from there.
Wow.
Well, you said
And
a
I
lot
said,
of
hey,
it.
what do you think about building a real estate company? And I was sitting in a meeting with him.
And I remember the moment I'm sitting there looking at him. I said, if anybody else asked me that question, I would say they're absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And because I really thought that. I thought, if anybody, the world had collapsed financially, right? It started with the mortgage markets, and then it transitioned into real estate, and then economies around the world started to collapse. And the business that we were in, 50% of the owners got out and 50% of the agents. And he's having this conversation with me. But, you say that as much as Everest is about being, and you say that jokingly, but still it's an anchor for people. That it's like it's a religion. It's not, but it is an anchor for people. Yeah. It's really terra firma. It's that rock in the storm that people can cling to. And as much as it is for them historically, it has been, I'll speak for me, it was for me
For
as
sure.
well.
The healing and the...
Because just to give you perspective, when he came to me and had that conversation, I had lost everything. I had everything. I was living in a really nice home, 8,500 square feet. Neighbors like Michael Jordan and Bill Engvall in a gated community, very exclusive. I lost all of that. The money in the bank, all gone, because I was invested in real estate. And that overnight, it dissipated.
I want you to know my claim to fame, by the way, is I told him, do not build that house. And
a lot of people told me that. I'm stubborn.
I know, but the good news is that I'm still smarter than him. So, no, I'm just kidding.
Well,
Actually, you know what?
Yes, you know why he
Hold on.
is? Because he asked me to be his business partner. It's
I
obviously
know.
smart.
But
right?
on a serious note, I know he'll attest this, but I always wonder, like, if he wouldn't have had that happen, what would have our journey been?
I was
And-
having that
and-
conversation with somebody
And
recently.
who would you have become, and what would the
No.
difference? I mean, just the
I'm
whole.
glad that I did
Like,
what I
it feels
did.
like there's a little bit of divine intervention with all of it.
It gives me chills because literally, Armani, if I had not done what I did, right, and lost everything, and he had come to me and everything was good, I would have said, I'm not taking
Right.
that risk. Things are good. I got millions. I'm not going to take any risks. I'm good. I'm where I need to be. In fact, you remember the conversation. It was in 2006, Amelia. And I called him and I said, there are only two people other than you who will know this. And I said, I'm not gloating, but I want you to know that I finally did it. I have $1 million cash in the bank. And then 2.5 years later, it was all gone. So Everest, the story of Everest is what George says. It's about hope. It's about renewal. It's about people being able to reach their potential.
Yeah, what's
And
possible.
That's what we do. What's possible.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Was it
Yeah.
when you saw the challenges that were in front of you guys and the whole industry and actually the whole country? Did that fuel where you asked yourself, well, I'm at the bottom right now, just like everyone. So why not have total control of where I'm going from here, rather than put
Yeah.
yourself in someone else's hands?
Well, for me, and I mean, I don't want to speak for John, but for me, what it did, and it's why, look, you guys feel it, you hear it, I speak it, I offend people by it.
Yeah.
They think, like, when I say this, which is, stop focusing on all the things on outside of yourself, like the media, the sensationalizing, the political process. And people say, well, wait, shouldn't I know what's going on? I'm like, look, there's enough people that if it's important enough, they'll just tell you what's going on. You don't need to go to the media to have you tell them or tell you what's going on. So what 2009, 10, and 11 taught me personally was that I truly can master my own future, and I can master it by the fact of what I choose to focus on. And at that moment, I remember so many people felt like homes will never sell, deals will never be done. The complete financial ruin and collapse of people's wealth, net worth, or their worth economically, their businesses, from banks to you name it. And what for me happened was I said, man, I can't pay attention to any of that. But the question is, what can I focus? So I've always said this now for years. I think there's ultimately an epidemic in our environment, or in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in our families, in our lives. And that is that we get so concerned of the things that are going on outside of us that we forget that the greatest concerns we should have is what's going on inside of us. And that means from what are you watching, what are you doing, who you're spending your time with, what time are you waking up, what time do you go to bed, what time, when do you prospect, when you do anything. And that's why I love John's statement years ago, more of a decade he came up with this. He said, I think Everest is more of a personal development company than it might even be a real estate company. And then he came up with the tagline, which is, we're a personal development company that happens to sell real estate. And not that we don't want to help every client, every person, but because we're so good as a leadership, a community of leaders, that the real estate becomes the easy part to help people navigate through the problems and challenges of buying or selling real estate. But that's because of the work that's been happening and been going on in regards to developing yourself as a human being and being a better human, being better for our communities, better for our families, better fathers, mothers, and all those different aspects. They all get better because of who we become, because of what we focus on. And the problem, I still go back to, not to beat this one dead, but man, holy cow, I'm just amazed at the impact that you can have in your life by choosing to put the blinders on and focus in on what you can control instead of getting so lit up, white hot, and emotional about all the things you can't. And I think it's important to recognize that, look, in the game of real estate, homes will always sell. It'll either be a buyer's market or a seller's market. But there will always be divorces, there will always be deaths, there will always be tragedy, there will always be job loss, there'll be economic crisis, there will always be people who can buy a home, save for a home, pay down their home, downsizing their home, upsizing it. I mean, there's always going to be a process where sales can happen. But if you get so engaged in all of the things outside of you, you can never see clearly to do the things that really will help you and build the life that you want to create.
Yeah.
So,
Well said.
Very powerful.
Quick question for both of you. I have just found that when you make a decision to do something, especially winning or building a business or anything like that, that life tends to test you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like life throws you a curveball. I call it new level, new devil. When you guys took off, I mean, how did life test you and how did you push through? Was there ever a moment where you kind of doubted a little bit or got tested?
Well, we both had it.
John's laughing,
yeah.
so
You had all your. You should tell your health, and I'll tell mine.
Well,
but I mean, it's crazy what occurred.
Yeah, it predated the formation of Everest, but then it continued through it. I mean, people look from the outside and always think that, well, it's been easy, right? Or that they had it all figured out. We didn't, especially I didn't.
When we would set goals, people would laugh at them.
Yeah.
I always say your goals aren't high enough if people aren't laughing and scoffing
Right.
and mocking them. I mean, we would set goals.
We were supposed to be out of business 6 months into it.
Yeah,
in fact, that first Christmas.
That's right, 11 years ago, we're not supposed to be in business
We're not
anymore.
supposed to.
Wow.
I remember it was Christmas time. It was around the holidays, and the rumor going around in the marketplace was that we were going out of business. We were closing our doors.
But fundamentally, it's because most people cannot see themselves doing it, so there's no way you
You can do it. And you used a word that was very interesting. It really comes down to choice. We have the opportunity to choose every single day. I don't remember who said it. It may have been attributed to Earl Nightingale, but the statement is that nobody knows enough to be an optimist. And if that statement is true, right, no one knows enough to be a pessimist. And so every day we get to choose. Are we going to choose to be the optimist or the pessimist? And one of the things that we just chose to do over a decade ago is to be the optimist, that it doesn't matter that the world was falling apart. Because what we recognized is that all of those things that are happening out there, ultimately we didn't have any control over that. But what we did have control over is what time we got up and what we did with our time, the things that we focused on. What we read, what we watched, what we listened to, the people we associate with, and the things we participated in. And that idea is really what created the concept of Everest, where we realized that, look, everything that we do is simply a choice, and our reality is nothing more than those choices. And so we get to choose based upon that next level, the devil that we're going to focus on, because life promises challenge. It does every time. Whether you sit there as an inanimate object, like a lot of people do, just waiting for time to pass, or you choose to be focused on a particular goal and to go after that thing, life will throw punches at you, sucker punches, and you've got to decide, what am I going to do? What am I going to focus on? And the cool thing about Everest is that we really try to help people focus on the things that they truly have control over and stop focusing on the things that they don't. So I remember it was 2009, and I literally thought, I thought I was dying. And I don't say that jokingly. I did. And it's easy for me to talk about now, and I talk about this quite a bit, and people will laugh when I tell the story. But at the time, it was very serious for me. It was a very serious psychological challenge that I had. I literally thought that I had a brain tumor. I thought that I had throat cancer. I thought that I had MS. And then some other things.
I remember.
Remember?
I remember I came to your office, you're like, sit down. I think I've got Lou Gehrig's disease. I'm like, what?
It speaks.
I mean,
it speaks to
he was serious as a heart attack.
Things were sideways. It speaks to the power of the mind, the ability to focus on the negative or the positive, right? I had 5 MRIs done over the course of 6 months. I went to a neurosurgeon who hooked me up to all of the wires and everything to find out if I had MS. And what was interesting is that time and time again, the internist, the ear, nose, throat, the neurosurgeon, the heart doctor, all of them said, "You're fine." And everything was fine physically, but things were not fine mentally. And so for as much as Everest has been, that cathartic thing and that stone, that rock in the storm for the people we brought in, it's been that for me, and I think George would say the same thing. Wow. So we have faced challenges. There was a time where we looked at the finances of the company early on, and we realized that we could not go forward with our own resources, and if we didn't find somebody in very short order, we were going to close our doors, right? And fortunately, somebody stepped up, and you can tell more about that story, because it was like it was divine intervention. It was like something beyond our control had really put this man before us and created an opportunity for us to stand here today and share the story. Because but for Steve Whitworth, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that came shortly after, because in the first 6 months of building Everest, that's when I was diagnosed and had a mental breakdown because I didn't have any chapstick, if you might remember.
How could I not? Literally, he's looking at me and he's having a mental breakdown, and he said, "Where's my chapstick? I don't have my chapstick." "It's okay, it's just chapstick." He said, "No, I need my chapstick."
And I remember cracking into tears when that happened. It was actually pretty interesting.
And thinking that he was dying.
But
You thought you were
and
dying.
it's because earlier that day I had been in a meeting and I wasn't feeling right and I was getting really woozy, and I remember I said, "Hey, I gotta excuse myself."
You were being very loud.
And Gretchen said, "Hey, do you need to yell?" I'm like, "Am I yelling?" She's like, "Yes," and he's sitting right next to you. And the yelling wasn't necessarily about a particular subject. It was just I was being really loud, which is not actually abnormal, but I am loud. But I remember I went into the bathroom and I opened up the window, and I remember sitting there and staring in the mirror, and I said, "Something's really wrong with me. Like I'm either something's really wrong with me or I'm dying." And I felt like I was going to collapse. And then later that day is when I really had that total breakdown. Anyway, I came to find out that after a series of different tests and different situations, but I came and concluded that I had ventricular tachycardia. And which is, those are the ones where you see the marathoner who's like really healthy, doing great. All of a sudden they're dead on the side of the road, and it's like, well, what happened? It's because they went into cardiac arrest because your body can't, or your heart isn't letting the blood out because it's going so fast. And it was, at one point they saw my heart rate at 240 beats a minute. So it'd go normal and then just go into a major spasm and then slow down again, and it kept doing that. And so anyway, that happened in the first 6 months of building Everest. So I had heart surgery over the first 2 years, but the first year and a half of Everest, even when we signed, the day we signed as a Century 21 franchise, I had blown and ripped and torn right in half.
That's right.
My ACL.
Yeah.
Like in half, like completely severed in half.
And in lots of pain.
In lots of pain.
Lots of pain.
But in fact, I remember I said, "I am not all here." I said, "You better pay attention."
He told me, he said, "You got to pay attention
You
to
better
these
pay
documents
attention
because I'm not all here."
I am not all here. Yes, I remember that.
So let me ask you this.
So
how did you rip it? Is basketball? Okay,
Yeah,
of course.
Okay. I heard you guys are like wondering too.
Yeah.
He lost the game, by the way.
I did ask if I made the shot.
Yeah, you did.
Do you remember that? And I'm like, okay, good.
Didn't make the shot.
I let's see, heart surgery, a knee surgery, 3 eye surgeries, got a staph infection on my face that almost killed me. I mean, that was in the first 18 months of building Everest. So I mean,
Choked to death on a bottle cap.
Oh yeah, and then at the end, and then I topped it off with squirting stuff in my mouth, and the cap popped off and almost choked to death.
Literally just lodged down in the center.
And I remember everyone, I remember Jennifer coming up to me, my wife, going, "Hey, you're okay?" Thinking I had the flu, and finally I remember just taking the thing. I finally got the cap out of my throat and holding it up. And
so she had no clue what was happening.
No, she just thought I was sick and throwing up. And she did not know I was literally choking to death at the time when that was happening, because it happened at 5:30 in the morning, and I woke everybody up, and everyone thought that I was just having the flu and everything else. But my point is, Louis, is that my point to that is that look, you're going to have temporary setbacks and defeats, and so what it taught me is, look, you guys just know this. We were talking about in the last several months. I had a concussion. you're going to have setbacks. The question is if you don't know where you're going. So when Everest was started, for me, one of the biggest moments was that I wrote, and it still is there today on a poster board in my bathroom, and I see it every morning, and it says $100 million in commissions, 1,000 plus agents in less than 10 years. And I would talk about these goals, and John was there. I talk about these goals in board meetings. I'd have owners around. I'd have other people who were hearing, and they would get so angry that such a ludicrous, crazy, ridiculous dream or objective could be tried to be had. And what is crazy to me is that in January or May 27th, 2009, we're sitting here questioning whether we can feed our family. And 6 years later, which seems like an eternity at that moment because the pain is so great, but 6 months or 6 years later, we're $100 million. We did $101 million of revenue. We had 1,100 agents, and we did it in 6 years. So the objective is that when all the temporary defeats, setbacks are occurring, like at Napoleon Hill we'll talk about, when all the tragedy occurs, when all the moments of disappointment are happening, you can't lose sight of where you're going. Because the problem that happens is that if you lose sight of where you're going, then you start making decisions that are not in alignment. Even though I was so ill, so sick, so destitute, I knew every day, still even my weakest moments, I'm like, this is where I'm going. And the problem is that most people, one, will never choose where they're going with their life. And number two, once they choose, they're always flip-flopping and going, well, I don't know. And I would just tell you that once you make a decision, do not waver from it. And just see what's possible. See what's possible over a period of time. We did it in 6 years. Today, now I'm like, well, what's going to happen over the next decade, right? And rewriting all of these other goals and objectives. And okay, where are we going? What's going to happen? What are we going to make happen? And the thing is, if you don't know where you're going, you are guaranteed poor decision making.
True.
Poor decision making comes from not knowing where you're going. When you know where you're going, decisions are easy.
True. Yeah.
Well, and your question is an important one. Has there been, roadblocks? Has there been trauma? Has there been resistance in the process? There's been a ton. But really to speak to that point, when you say know where you're going, it's about having some sort of passion, something that you really want to achieve, that it's more important than the pain and the rejection, the disappointment, all the roadblocks that life will throw at you, and the people around you that you believe support you and believe in you, that so many of them, because of what they see going on, they can't believe that it's possible. It's interesting the number of people that we've surrounded ourselves with over the years who didn't believe that it was possible. Now, there have been a good core of people who believed, and they've been by our side from the very beginning, but it's interesting how people have a lack of belief. And I really think it comes down to a lack of passion in something. I want to share this story with you because it's really important.
Please.
And it kind of goes to what he said. He had the ventricular tachycardia, and he had to go in for surgery. And he came to me and one of our partners in Utah in the early years, Rob Oakey. And he said, well, the bad news is, guys, that I've got to go have surgery. I'm going to be away for about, 6 to 8 weeks? Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks. He said, the good news is that you guys are here and you can take care of everything. Now, that may seem like no big deal, but just to give you some perspective, up to that point, we were about 6 months into the company. I had never owned my own company, and I had never led a real estate brokerage. It was all new to me. I'd been selling real estate and had done that very well for 16 years, but this was completely new to me. This idea that you had to come in and inspire and motivate people and coach and train people and speak in front of them in a way that kept their attention. And he makes it look so easy, and I watched him do that over those first several months, and he comes to me and says, you're going to have to take over. I can tell you, I was petrified. I was petrified. I thought, I can't do this. There is no way that I'm going to be able to do this. But I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to say, no, I can't do this. He needed me. The people in the organization needed me. So Rob and I, for those 6 weeks or so, did what we had to do. And he came back, and I remember the time. I'm sure you remember the meeting. We were actually in what was the training room, and it also served as a conference room, because the space that we had initially, there wasn't much there. It was a multi-purpose room. And he asked the question, he said, so how was it? How did things go? And Rob looked at him and said, I think things were okay. And I looked at Rob like he'd lost his mind. And I looked over at George, and I said to him, things didn't go well. And he said, you're right, things didn't go well. And then he went on to talk about an agent in the company who I love and adore to this day, who has since passed, Dave Stocco. And he said, I had a conversation with Dave Stocco. And Dave Stocco's words were, John's a really good guy, but you shouldn't have him speak and you shouldn't have him coaching people. And you might think, well, were you angry with his statement? How did you feel about that? I was not angry with Dave, and I was not angry with George. In fact, I don't know if you remember.
No, I remember it clearly.
I looked at George and I said to him, and there were
very
tears.
emotionally,
there were
and
tears
you
in
felt
my
that.
eyes. And the tears were not about the fact that Dave had the audacity to say this, because Dave was spot on. His assessment was accurate. And George did the right thing by confronting me. But I remember just the emotion that I felt because I was so disappointed in myself that I had not performed to the level that the people in the organization needed me to for them to get to the next level. And I remember looking at George, I looked at you and I said, I will be angry if there's any time in the future that I find out that you don't tell me what I need to hear in order for me to improve the way in which I do my job. In other words, to grow as a leader. And I asked him, I said, I need your commitment that moving forward in this journey, that you will tell me when I am not performing up to par. You'll confront me. And he's committed to that, and ever since he's done that. In fact, he does it very often. So.
Well, you can't miss the best part of that is that what Dave Stocco said was that John is a good guy, and I still remember with such deep emotion that I remember you pointing your finger like you do, and you said, I will not be known as just a good guy.
Yeah.
I love that.
And it was like this defining moment, like, right, we all have these defining moments in our lives, right? Where it's like, wait, enough, that's not who I'm going to be.
Yeah. And so I went on this, and I talk about the word passion. It was that moment where I realized I want this more than the pain that I know that I'm enduring. Because there were times where literally, in the months and the couple of years that followed, that I questioned whether I was going to do it. There was a moment, I remember it was the fall of 2012, I believe. I went up into the canyon and I sat on a rock and I journaled and questioned whether I was going to even do this, or I was going to go back down and tell him I'm done. Buy me out, I'm done. And I remember having that conversation with myself saying, is that really what I want? Am I going to quit on this? And if I quit on this, what does that say about me and what am I going to do? This is my opportunity to become the person I want to become, to be that speaker, that leader, the person who can inspire people, motivate people, and help them become what they are programmed to be, if I can just help draw it out of them. But in order for me to do that, I've got to do that with myself and put myself in the right environment. So I committed to doing that. Look, success is, in my opinion, it's 9/10 passion. You have to have passion. The rest of it, the 10%, is taking the action. Most people will not take the necessary action because they're not passionate enough to endure the pain. They just won't endure the pain.
Do you guys think that when you just said that, because when we were opening the show, we talked about a word, I brought up a word that really feels, for me, it feels like it was an obstacle for most of my life. And that word is pride.
Yeah.
It has limited me so much in my early years, and even more recently, up to 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where I squashed that pride, and it opened up so much more to me.
does.
And I think a lot of people, no matter what industry you're in, anywhere, whoever's listening, I think everyone battles that either early or later in their years. That pride thing that prevents them from embracing the potential that each one of us has.
Yeah.
Well, you look at the late, great, one of the best CEOs of all time, Jack Welch, who said, it takes a lot of courage to be the dumbest guy in the room.
Yeah.
And then he went on to say, and how you prove that you're willing to say I'm the dumbest guy is you're willing to ask lots of questions.
Yeah.
And the challenge is that we get, and then I love the late, all these guys have passed away, but the late Wayne Dyer, who said, look, your ego is contrived of basically, what do others think of me? What have I acquired? And what have I done? And if you can remove that part, meaning that you don't rest on your laurels of what I've done, or hey, look at me, what I've achieved, or hey, look at me in some other fashion. If you can set that aside, you then begin asking better questions, and you begin to be really more honest and transparent. You start really developing the person that each one of us, to your point, is capable of being. And I was thinking as John was speaking, and that there's one word that just keeps like this big blaring sign in my head, which is discipline. And you mentioned a gentleman by the name of Steve Whitworth, who, again, a gentleman who's passed away, but he died of cancer, prostate cancer, when he was he was 49, I believe it was, or 47 or 49.
He was in his late 40s.
Right, and I say that because this guy, in the midst of all of my heart issues, we needed additional capital to bring into the company to say, okay, are we going to really build this thing? And I remember when I went to Steve, and I came to Steve. He was actually dealing with cancer, and I'd never seen someone who ended up getting what's called chemotherapy, right? We've all heard of that, and I thought that was a big, deal. And this is, a long time ago, but I'd never been around someone who had gotten chemotherapy. I thought it was quite something significant. He said, I called him and said, hey, I want to come see you. And I didn't know Steve that well. I had met him in some religious outings and different things like that, and I didn't know him really well. But I have to tell you, those are the moments, right? You've got to look for inspiration. There's these. I believe this universe is so dialed in to giving you what you want, and whether you want to call that universe God, source, creator, the divine, whatever it is for you. But my point is, I believe that there is those moments of guidance that occur, and I can still remember dropping to my knees, putting a list together of the people that I thought who should help build this company. And it was his name, still to this day, can give me the chills, that was at the top of that list. I got up off of my knees and said, okay, I'm going to call him. So I called him. He asked me to come over. He's getting chemotherapy at the hospital. I remember he's sitting there eating a cheeseburger and drinking a shake and having chemo. I'm like, this is a little odd. I didn't know that chemo can be so exciting, but we had a good laugh about it. I'm like, I didn't know what this all meant. He was sitting in a lazy boy chair, basically. And I remember I said, hey, I need your help, and I want to build this company, and I want $100,000. And he said, well, I think we're going to do it. And he goes, I think I want to do it. And it was the most pathetic presentation I think I've ever given. The worst listing presentation, if you want to call it, in your life. I mean, it was horrible. I mean, the numbers were inaccurate. The flip chart didn't make sense. He was asking all sorts of questions that I would today I would, look through something like that and I would attack every number, because none of them probably made sense. But this was the thing, why I say discipline, is that he said, I want to help you. And then I still remember I said, because it was a pretty emotional time. I mean, I had been on the verge of death with the heart stuff. The market was crashing. Economically, things were a disaster. Here we are trying to build a real estate company when everything's going sideways. And I said, may I ask you, why you're willing to help? And I should say this, just to give you the perspective of trust that this man had, he said, unless you otherwise, we'll take care of some paperwork and the note and everything. He goes, I'll have a $100,000 cashier's check at your office tomorrow morning when you get there. And I remember he walked in, gave me a $100,000 check, shook my hand, and said, okay, we'll talk next week, get things under control. I mean, it was literally, I don't know very many people that just say, here's $100,000, shake my hand, sounds good, we'll talk next week about it. Wow. And so, but this is the thing that taught me, because again, I didn't know him that well, Amelia. I mean, I knew him, but that day, before he had sent and given the check, I asked, can I just ask why you're willing to help? And this is what he told me. He said, I have watched you for 5 years working with young men in the church, and I've watched you help them and build their lives in scouting programs, all these other things. He goes, and I've just been a quiet observer watching you. Mm. And he says, and I want to help you. I can get choked up about that in a heartbeat. Wow. But then I can push it forward. Look, building California and the monstrosity it was and all the different things that we've done to expand the company. Look, you either create that revenue internally or you go out and get it. Well, look, there's been some hard moments along with that. Same thing. We rented from a gentleman who owns the glass buildings in Salt Lake City, Utah. Some of you have been there. And we're there, and for years, this guy has watched me. And in one of my most darkest moments in building the company, when things seemed most horrific and oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Same thing. I got on my knees. I said, who should I turn to? His name came to mind. I knew him, but not like I know him now. Now I would consider him like a father to me, but not back then. Not back then. And this gentleman by the name of Tom Lloyd, I went to meet him, and in a handshake, he said, here's $250,000. And he goes, we'll talk about it later. Same thing. I thought, man, what is the deal with this? And the same thing, I asked the question, hey, so why? And he said the same thing. I've watched you for 8 years and how you work and how you run your life. And again, you are so disciplined. He goes, I have no doubt that you'll make it. And he goes, I want to help you. And my observation is that, they talk about what character is what you're doing when no one is watching, right? But more importantly, I think that there's something to be had that what can we each say that we're really disciplined in, right? Are we highly disciplined in our health? Are we highly disciplined in our relationships? Are we highly disciplined economically? But people are watching, and it's not that like, hey, watch me be disciplined. It's not necessarily that. It's there's a message that is stated by nothing being said, by just the activities of your life, by the disciplines that you show. And what I have found is that in my most darkest hours, my most difficult moments, specifically economically, that I didn't realize that because I stayed my course when the times were good or times were bad, I just stayed my course. People stepped forward because they saw that and they realized, wait a second, to your point, he believes in it, he's passionate about it, and you know what? I want to help him because of just being an observer on the sidelines as they looked and watched and looked into my life. So I can't stress enough that if you really, really want to be free, you got to ask yourself then, how disciplined are you? Because to me, and it's something I've said for many years, discipline equals freedom. If you want to be free, get disciplined. You want to go on more trips? Get disciplined. You want to pay off your house? Get disciplined. You want to have better health? Get disciplined. It's all discipline. Everything comes down to discipline. And almost every great blessing of my life has come down to me because someone observed, oh, he's really disciplined, so I'm going to buy in and I'll help him.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do they say? It's not how you see yourself, it's how people see you, who you really are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
You know, just observers, and I just hope that no one underestimates the And the thing is, to your point, right? There's those days where things happen and you don't feel like doing stuff, and you know, I've said this for you. You know, do what you're supposed to do despite how you feel. Am I perfect at that? No, but it's a better mantra than I'm too tired, I can't do this today. Versus, you know what? Doesn't matter how I feel, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, that's a different message. And you start crafting and creating a better internal dialogue, and you start mastering your life based on the stories that you're telling yourself, and you start divorcing old stories and marrying new ones, and you start, you know, mastering at a higher level the game of life that you want to play. And then all of a sudden real estate becomes easy. It's not like you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, what am I going to do to sell real estate? You're like, real estate's pretty easy based on all the work I've done, as you've been saying, right? Mm-hmm. On the inside, real estate's pretty easy because the hardest work you're going to do is right between your own ears and in your own heart.
Yeah, it's true. Very
So.
true.
Jeez. Oh my goodness. Well, you answered every question that
Every-
I had.
Oh, every one of them. I got more.
But no, I
The hits
just have-
keep coming, Amelia.
Just keep on coming. I'm looking at you like, okay, you're answering, and they're looking at me like they're answering your question.
course.
I know.
They're
I was
reading
gonna
our
say
minds,
that.
I
I was
think.
going to let you say it.
Yeah,
though.
I love it.
But really what I want people to understand, and so many people who are looking to become entrepreneurs, real estate agents, think that because of where they come from, it prohibits them to where they're going. So each of you, I know, as I know both of you personally, I know that's not the case for either of you, that you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Really tell us who you are before the success of your companies, before all of these amazing people are surrounding you. Where did you start from, John?
So I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I was born with my foot in my mouth. No, I was born in a very small town in Utah, but moved from that place at a very young age to an even smaller town. In fact, the town that I grew up in, Armani, had 1,000 people. There were literally more cows in my hometown than people.
I will vouch for that because I Google Earthed it a
Okay.
couple months ago.
Right?
And you saw all the cows?
Yeah.
So yeah, that is pretty.
It is true.
accurate.
It is true.
The Roadkill Cafe.
And we did not have any cafes. It was literally that small of a town. But I tell people this story that I grew up in trailers, and the first one that I remember was a travel trailer. And many years ago, I was telling that story to somebody. My dad happened to be standing very close by, and he heard me say that my first home was a travel trailer, and that it was an 8 by 12 trailer. And he walked up and interrupted the conversation. And if you know my dad at all, especially in his younger years, was very, very strict and just a very robust guy, very intimidating. And he walked in and he interrupted the conversation. He said, "No, that's not true." And I looked at him like, "It is true. I've got pictures. I remember the trailer." And he said, "No, it wasn't 8 by 12. It was 8 by 16. So it was 4 feet longer."
Yeah.
Right?
Watch it.
And I remember we went from that travel trailer to a single wide pink trailer. Now imagine growing up in Orangeville, Utah, right? A lot of rednecks there, right? And there I am growing up in a pink trailer. You can imagine that I probably got picked on a little bit, Amelia Marie. I got picked on,
Just a little bit.
right? The good news is that a few years after that, we moved into a double wide trailer that was 28 feet by 69 feet. So if anybody remembers the Jeffersons, George and Wheezy, we were moving on up.
Yes.
I mean, it felt really good to be in this double wide trailer. And I looked at it as a house, but I remember, because it made the papers, and there was this kind of this brouhaha about it, that the city father had made the comment about people who lived in the community in trailers, and he referred to us as trailer trash. And and it didn't really register me at the time, but as I got older, I thought, oh, he was really being critical of us and who we were as people. But it didn't really faze me. This happened before I was even born, but my dad spent 3 years in the Utah State Penitentiary. Now, I say that to people and think, oh, holy cow, so your dad really was a rough guy. Well, not the guy that I knew, because that was his early years, 19, 20, 21, 22, and he spent 3 years in the Utah State Penitentiary with murderers and rapists and people who had done all sorts of horrible things. He had not done those things, but he had a penchant for taking things that weren't his, and he got caught enough and he got put into prison. But I tell people that there wasn't a better example for me in my life of somebody who was honest and had integrity and was very kind and caring and could not say no to people, and that's my dad. I came from pretty humble beginnings, but my parents were very good at creating a home, even though my home had axles and was supported by cinder blocks. There was a lot of love, and my mom was great at instilling in me a sense of belief in myself. And and unfortunately there are a lot of people who aren't necessarily from those sorts of situations, and they came from very difficult circumstances and upbringing. But it just reminds me of this story. I'll tell this very quickly. Of two brothers who were raised in a household where their father was a drunk. And the one brother grew up to be a doctor. The other one grew up to be a drunk like his father, in and out of prison. And they were both interviewed, and they asked the first brother, the doctor, so how was it that you came from this household where there was a lot of physical abuse, a lot of mental abuse? Your father was a drunk. How is it that you became a doctor? And he said, well, my father was a drunk. What else did you expect me to do? In other words, he looked at that in that example, and he said, I don't want to become that. He chose to do something different. Then they interviewed his younger brother and asked him the question, how is it that you ended up being a drunk and in and out of prison? And he said the same thing. Well, what would you expect? My father was a drunk who abused us mentally and emotionally and physically. It comes back to a choice. Look, we don't get to choose the family that we're born into. We don't get to choose so much of our circumstances, but what we do get to choose is what we do from this moment forward. So my message to people always is, stop worrying about what has happened and start focusing on what you're going to do moving forward. Mm-hmm. Because that really is ultimately the most important thing. I mean, I could tell you some stories about growing up and the challenges, but really at the end of the day, none of that matters as long as we don't let it matter. Yeah. And so many people, I think there are two types of people. There are victims and victors. Victims will focus on their challenges and all the reasons why they don't have and could never do. And then there are the victors. And the victors simply say, I'm not going to focus on the challenges, I'm going to focus on the solutions. And that's what Everest is really about, because it recognizes, look, don't see things any worse than they are, don't see them any better than they are. At the moment, they are what they are, and now cast a vision of what life could be like and focus on what you have to do to make it that. And everybody has that potential in them. They just have to be in the right environment with the right people who can bring that out of them. And it's the reason that I stuck with Everest. It's the reason I didn't leave, because I needed that for myself. Yeah. And it's the reason I'm so passionate about when I share the story with people. That's why you should be with the company. That's why you should be part of what it is that we do. Yeah. Because it allows people to be who they're programmed to be, who their creator really initially said that they could be. They got to bring it out of themselves. So,
thank you.
Wow, yeah. I could not ask for something better. I mean, wow.
In a nutshell, I was just talking to my wife yesterday, Jennifer, about this, and we were talking about just the coined phrase of your current circumstances do not equal your future. And I said, well, it's not just your current circumstances. I have said it's also your past. Yeah. Right? Your past doesn't equal your future unless you make it so.
Right.
And so the challenge is, you hear that great story of those two, or the one who became the doctor and the one who was in and out of prison, and you start to recognize that, wait a second here, what's the story I'm willing to tell myself about the things that I've dealt with? And if you're going to blame, I always love this, if you're going to blame everything and everything around you for everything that's gone bad for you, you better darn well blame them for all the good things that have happened too.
Absolutely.
Because I look at all the tragedy, trial, struggle, and strife as being some of the great benefits and blessings of my life, to where you're able to move forward and say, okay, if I didn't have that struggle, I would have never figured out this part of it. To your point, right?
Right.
Gaining the world and then losing it in some
Yep.
words, right? Or, and so as you move through that, just recognizing that your current circumstances don't have to equal your future, but they will I would say they will if you don't get really clear on where it is you want to take your life, so that you can start altering the message, altering the story, altering the actions, altering the decisions you're making every day, so that they can get in alignment with where you want to take your life and what you want it to be.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's really fun to watch, and people, when they overcome their tragedy. I mean, it's so inspiring. We're not inspired by people who were born into awesomeness, never had a challenge, and then died great, lived great, and were incredible the end. We're like, why would I want to watch a story? But we're inspired by someone who loses everything, and maybe they had everything, and then they lose everything, and then they come back again, and you're like, whoa, wow,
It's
like, how
inspiring.
did you do that?
Yeah.
And the thing that we have to be careful of, right, is to your point, is people will meet now and they're like, oh my gosh, well, because you've always been like that. I'm like, let me tell you something. I can remember only 11 years ago where I was wondering if I'm feeding my family. So don't think I forgot what it feels like to not have anything, because I will never forget that. And I want to remember that feeling, because every day I'm moving further and further away from that place where I was, that past that is unacceptable to live in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Quick question. So I remember a couple years back, sitting on the opposite side of Everest at a real estate seminar. And you guys obviously have built an amazing company out in Utah. Why California? And why Ventura County?
It's a good question. It's a very good question.
Gonna get real.
I know. It's getting real, baby. You know, here's what it was, is that our appetite to really wanting to impact the lives of other people, and that sounds like warm and fuzzy, but what really started to happen is that we started to saturate the Utah market across really the major corridors of the major population portions of the state. And then at that point, we're like, okay, well, wait a second here. We've kind of like maxed out at some level what can really be done here. Well, what makes the best sense? And to your point, we met lots of great people at different seminars, right? And said, wow, like, well, what are these people doing, and what states seem to be the best to do business in? Which best ones have the best opportunities? And so that's when we kind of put out there to the world, if you'd say, hey, we would like to buy something or acquire something or do something significant in the state of California. And we said, look, let's get into the Southern California market, because there's ancillary services where we can drive mortgage and escrow and other portions of the pieces of the business. And so we put that out there. What's interesting is that not only did we do that, right, but let's see, Century 21's been in business for nearly 50 years. And verifiably, we took on the largest single acquisition in the history of Century 21 that had never been done at the size that we have done it. So we were like, well, gosh, if we're going to go, let's go big. You know, and man, it was quite. I mean, you guys have been firsthand to many of the highs and the lows of doing that. But we've often privately talked and said, man, would we do that again? And both of us, with absolute like fierceness in our voice, would be like, unquestionably, we would do it again. Yeah. And the reason, here I'll tell you, is I get less concerned today of like, okay, how much money am I actually going to earn? Yes, there has to be fiscal responsibility. Yes, you need to make a profit. But what people mostly don't want to talk about, and that is that who do you have to become to do what you're doing? Because the guy who today now is the CEO of a $150 million company is not the same guy who was selling a few homes 12, 13 years ago.
Amen to that.
Right?
Yeah, it's true.
Right?
No, it's true.
You can't be the same person.
There's no way.
So the issue is that if you want to earn more, if you want to have more, you have to become more. And so the thing that I have loved about, just for me on a personal, like one of us has our personal stories of like Everest as an organization, but it almost like it if you want to have something, it forces your hand at becoming more. And I remember again the late Jim Rohn, right? He was asked by his mentor, if those who are listening haven't listened to him, boy, he'd be a great guy to pick up. But he's asked by his own mentor, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and he's passed away now. But Jim was asked said by his mentor Earl Schoaf, said, "Hey, you should go earn $1 million." And Jim said, "Man, I really like the idea of that whole idea, but why $1 million?" And I still will never forget. I remember when I heard it, and he said, "Oh, Jim, it's not the $1 million that matters. It's who you have to become to earn $1 million."
Yeah.
And so I remember, for me on a personal level, a gentleman by the name of Steve Forey, great mentor of mine, met him in my late teens and early 20s. And I remember he would say this to me all the time: chase the principles of leadership, not money. And if you won't chase money, but you'll chase the principles of leadership, the money will always show up. And so, as hard as that is, and you want a shortcut, you want to get to where you want to get to faster, and it's so grueling, so hard, like you talked about, like sitting then writing in your journal going, "Man, am I really going to do this thing?" But the thing is, it's such a great reward when you know that you've had to become something more than you were. You didn't just get lucky, you didn't just make some money, but you had to become something different than you were before. And that is the great reward above all the things that you'll become.
Well, and the reward isn't that you've become more, that's great, but it's the fact that because you are more, you're able to go out and impact more lives,
Contribute,
right?
do more, achieve more.
Because that's what we've done. I mean, when we started, we had virtually no agents, and within the course of the last 11 years, we have an organization that's gathered with all companies, leadership, and independent contractors, 1,200 people. It looks much different today than it did 11 years ago, and it has to do with the fact that the two young guys, over a decade ago, would not have had the capacity a decade ago to do what they're doing here today. There's that commitment to continual progress, and what is interesting, I know at his core, as good as he is at everything that he does, he's not done. He recognizes there's still room to grow. I mean, I look at him, I say, there's a lot of room to grow.
That's right.
The interesting thing is that we've known each other for 27 years. I was in the business for a year. He had just gotten in his first month, and we met at a company.
Just coming July, 27 years.
27 years. Wow. 27 years. So when we do that back and forth, it's like it's brotherly love.
No, it really hurts me.
And I don't care.
Yeah, it's true.
Where do you guys see the future of your endeavors here in California? What is the goal, the ultimate goal, other than what you've done in Utah? Obviously, it's been a great history of Everest, but here in Southern California, I'm sure when you were in Utah in the early years, you had the conversation of where do we want to go with this? But you are here now, in 2020. Where do we want to go? Where do you guys want to go?
Well, I think that the number one objective that I hold on to personally, no matter what, which is assisting every individual that I meet to becoming their very best. And that may, again, seem warm and fuzzy, but if I lose sight of that, then it just becomes an organization led off of a spreadsheet. And I've said this for years, and I believe it deeply to my core, that if this organization is only led by spreadsheets and just fiscal dollars, or dollars fiscally, I'm going to go do something different. Because it's got to make a profound difference in the lives of the people that I'm associating with. So I look at that and say, okay, with growth and expansion and maneuvering and amplifying or increasing mortgage use, title and escrow usage, and then he doesn't even know this, but I mean, just to give perspective, actually, I guess maybe you do know that. I should tell you
I don't
more.
know.
Shouldn't I talk to you more?
You should.
Exclusive
Something
right
like
here.
that.
We have an
Exclusive.
exclusive. Let's go.
Here's the scoop.
But I mean, to give perspective, I mean, our objective is to really have offices, I would arguably say, from San Diego all the way up to Santa Barbara. And even today, we're in the midst of negotiating on different companies. And I found is that in the most difficult moments of the economy are the most amazing times, obviously, to grow. And the majority of the growth that Everest has taken on, and its most substantial growth that is most profitable, has always occurred during the most difficult moments of the market or the economy. And although real estate is strong, everyone also knows that if you're an owner of a real estate company, you've got some interesting times ahead. and there's an aging broker owner population. So my hope is that, one, we're making an impact on every single individual that comes into the contact of our organization and assisting them to become their very best. But in the sense of size, growth, and opportunity, I can't imagine that we would not be expanding our footprint, because I think we have a real special message to share with people.
Yeah.
And the proof is in the pudding. We're seeing it over and over again. I mean, our money, we have the number one small team in the world for Century 21 out of 100 and something thousand agents, 7,000 offices worldwide. So we have the number one office, we have the number two company, we have the top, according to Real Trends from a global perspective, we're
All brands,
all independents, everything. We're a top 80 company in the world against all brands and all independents, you name it. You start looking at our small teams, large teams, individual offices, total company, and you start looking at, wait, something's going on here that people really like. And I think my biggest thing would be to invite people to say, man, don't be so scared to work and look from within, and come see what we're doing. What's funny is people will say, man, George, you're so obsessed with making money. I mean, you guys have been around me enough. You've been around me for 27 years. I rarely talk about the money. But what I recognize that if we do certain things, the money is the automatic byproduct. If we help enough people, right, bless their lives, improve their lives, help them to become better in the business, better fathers, mothers, citizens to our community and to our neighbors. I mean, all of a sudden you start realizing, wait a second here, the money will always follow, because you help people become more. And how you become invaluable, not only to the real estate community or to the people you associate with, is you help people get to the next level in their life. And if you can help people get to the next level, then the automatic is you become invaluable. They're willing to pay that. And I think that I watch agents get so consumed with the scarcity of either business, the scarcity of commission structures, and yet those would never be conversations of our top agents. Because these are agents earning $1, $2, $3, $4 million a year. They're not sitting here going, well, are you going to charge me a transaction fee? That's not the conversation. The conversation is, can you help me make another $1 million? I'm happy to pay you your transaction fee. And the problem is that we get in such a scarcity mindset that we stop thinking in a place of abundance. And this world, this universe, as scarce as the media tries to make it look like and seem like it is abundant beyond measure. And there's so much opportunity and so many things that we can all do. I just hope that no one settles in on the idea that there is this limitation to what they can achieve and what they can accomplish, especially in the game of real estate, as long as we're doing it.
Yes, powerful. I can't help but go back a little bit. You guys talked about the early years, your conflict you had with the issues you went, either health, mental, whatever it may be.
right?
Did that have anything to do with the way, because I've heard a little bit of your conversations recently where you talk about meditation,
Right.
self-improvement. Did that come from that experience that you guys went through?
Well, I think that the most important conversation that we have is the conversation we have with ourselves,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we talk about the importance of how, as a leader, it's our job to go out and to get people to follow us, right? To feel confident in our ability to lead them to the next level. And yet, the most important conversation that any human being has is the conversation they have with themselves. And so this idea of meditation, you use whatever words you want to use. I don't, historically in my life, it's not the word that I used historically, but it's just simply the conversation, the thoughts that we have. The average person has 60,000 thoughts every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And the vast majority of those thoughts are negative. And so just recognizing that and say, okay, what is the conversation or conversations I'm having with myself, right? And taking the time to journal, it's important. I looked at the journal as something that young girls did in their teens, right? Dear Diary, Johnny did or Janie did, right? And I wasn't going to touch it because that's not what men did. It's not what people did, just what teenagers did. What I've realized is that this idea of meditation, thought, mindfulness, that it really is a very important component to a person's journey, as George said, becoming more. So it's one of the things that we talk about. Everest is about recognizing the rules of success, bottom line. We don't create the rules, we just recognize what they are and we play the game by those rules. And because we have played the game by those rules for the last 11 years, we do a lot of winning. And you know this because real estate is about assembling people who are very free-minded. They're entrepreneurs. They like to go out and be their own boss. They want to do their own thing. They are not employees. They're independent contractors. They come because they want to be. And it amazes me today that we've accomplished what we've accomplished in the relatively short. It doesn't feel like it's been a short period of time, but you look at it, it's a decade. And to create a company that, to his point, 150 million in revenue with 1,200 people, it goes back to the point that if you will identify what the principles are, what the rules are of success, and just live by those, be disciplined, that good things will happen.
It's true. It's true.
What a way to end it.
Yeah, what a way. I keep on looking at both gentlemen that I have standing here in this room, and they've talked about the great men before them. And I say this, I feel like we're in the presence of two great men, and
Oh, you're
in
very
many
sweet.
years
Thank
to
you.
come. And it's almost going to make me emotional. In many years to come, I know that I will be able to say that George
me get the
Morris
camera
and
real
John
quick.
Ciet
me get the
were
camera.
what they would say, because I've learned,
Thank you.
just in this short
Yeah.
time, we've learned so much from both of you.
You're very kind.
And
Thank you.
so much that people are learning, and what a true blessing just to be in your guys' presence and learn from your
Well, this has been fun.
Yeah.
It was a great
Thank
conversation.
you.
Well,
Well,
it's the law of attraction. And the reason we
Absolutely.
got you here is so we could get more listeners. So
Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
Well, but to your point, Amelia, people always ask, well, wait, where did you learn this and that? I'm like, there's two fundamental places I've learned. One is, man, I have made so many mistakes, so many errors, so many stupid decisions, so many, errors in regards to judgment of economics and how do I do this and how do I do that, which you learn from that, right? You hope to not repeat those. And then the other side is that I was adding up just a few weeks ago, and I thought, I have coached personally, like sat down individually, like with one person, one-on-one, over the last decade, nearly 20,000 times. And I sit there and I think, okay, in 20,000 visits, there has to be some level of like clues as to how people are either making it great in their life or they're really failing in their life. And you starting to realize that, man, I'd have to be a really like one of the most complete idiots to not recognize some patterns that people, the way in which they live this business and have extraordinary success in it. Where, can they have a great family? Can they be a great mother or a great father or a great sibling or a great friend to others? Can they actually earn the money and at the same time have all these other beautiful blessings of their life? And the answer is yes, to your point. If you follow the system, if you, I always say, submit to a process, which, man, seems so like with so much constriction to it. But again, I go back to discipline equals freedom. Yeah. And if you want to be free, recognize that the freedom will come because you get highly disciplined in the areas of your life that you want to feel that freedom and experience the freedoms of life.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I know we got to wind down,
Yep.
and I'm sorry to interrupt.
go
I know we got to wind down, but a lot of noise going on out there.
Okay.
And before we wrap up, any final thoughts of a message you would like to get out to our viewers, our listeners, of how to keep pushing forward and eliminate that noise?
Yeah, first and foremost is focus on the right stuff. But I would also say, look, you're not living right in a vacuum. And Louis, we're sitting here watching a lot of different heartache and challenge. We're watching a lot of anger, a lot of hatred. I mean, first and foremost, I would say, look, both John and I stand, united, and obviously all of us as an organization that, we would denounce any type of hatred, violence, racism, and all the different things that unfortunately either you really see or what is sensationalized, and both things are happening, no question in my mind. But it's important to recognize that we have to have a tremendous amount of empathy right now. And I've said this for a long time also, which is, look, three fundamental things, and that is that the timing of what we're saying is really important whenever we're having conversations. So emotional discipline is really important right now. And second is really pay attention to what your message is. Like, what are you saying? In simple terms, if you're a real estate agent, are you sending out, in the midst of the pandemic, have a happy spring? Right? It's like, wait a second here, or it's a great time to put your home on the market, but you're worried about whether you're going to make it today. So the messaging has to be in alignment, right? Check your campaigns, check what you're sending out, check what you're saying in relationship to what's going on around you. And then the third is the tonality of that message. And so I've just really, for me on a personal level, had to take a step back and go, okay, wait a second here, right? What is the timing of what I'm saying? Number two, what is the actual message, the words that I'm speaking? And the third component is the tone that I'm using as I'm speaking these things. And I think that, if there's anything that the world could need right now is a deep sense of empathy And I think how we express that, how we show that, how we show our love for one another is we show it through our kindness, right, and through our actions. So I think that if we could do more of that, look, no single politician is going to, in some words, what I consider change the entire course of our lives. The only person who has ultimate control of our lives is ourselves. We get to choose whether we love or hate. We get to choose whether, we're going to be a racist, or we're going to, be cruel and brutal to others, or we're going to be kind, loving, and gentle and patient with others. Those are all decisions that each one of us gets to make every single day based on who we choose to be. So I would just echo to everybody that, man, if we could show a lot more empathy, if we could show up in life with a lot more kindness, I think there would be a much better world ahead.
Awesome. Amazing.
That's it.
Yep.
That's it.
Thank you for getting
To
real with
wrap.
us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, we appreciate you guys coming here.
Yes.
You're very
It has
welcome.
been an awesome. I wish we had more time to do
Yeah,
this.
same
Yes.
here.
And don't be strangers, because this is going to.
That sounds like an invite.
Yes,
Hey, oh,
it's an
that's for
invite.
sure.
And in the next episode with these guys, I am going to ask, how can Utah Jazz fans live next to Michael Jordan? That is the next question we're going to ask. But with that being said, thank you guys so much. We
Thank you.
you.
Appreciate it.
It's been
Thank
fun.
you so much. Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thank you.